already in session. We just left our executive session and we're now back, obviously. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as stated, please? Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. Does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda this evening?
I wanted to pull 4.1, the calendar for next year.
Does anybody else have anything to pull? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated? And the second, very good second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so it was 4.1, the calendar. What was your question on?
So we have gotten some feedback from parents about the half days we use for professional development. And I just wanted to get some background information on how and why we use professional or half days for our professional development for our teachers.
Yeah, I'll let Margaret take that. It's been an initiative for the last maybe handful of years that we connect these early release days. So students are fed and then they leave after lunch, and we connect that time with contractually approved time for teachers to stay after school. So there's an uninterrupted block of time. Margaret leads our calendar committee that meets with various union representatives, looks at our contracts, looks at our federal holidays, looks at the testing schedule, and we oftentimes have very limited decision-making authority when we look at our calendar, especially in light of the federal holidays and other holidays that we observe. But in terms of your specific question, Ellie, I'll let Margaret talk about what the teachers use that time for and why it's valuable for us.
Hi, so we have in the past few years, as Joe said, had 5 half days scattered throughout the year so that teachers could spend an extended period of time together on a myriad of things. We've had a lot of PD in the past few years coming in from the outside, sometimes people internally offering PD to one another. I would say that we have made tremendous use of that time, but every good consultant tells you that it's their job to work themselves out of a job. And certainly at the elementary level, we have 3 outstanding people we've been working with who are at the end of their work with us. In addition to that, the switch to the Princeton plan allows the grade levels to be together all the time. So it's not a 4th grade here, a 4th grade there, a 4th grade someplace else. The 4th grade is together every day. They will have common planning time, perhaps not all 8 sections, maybe 4 and 4. So there will be plenty of time in the buildings for them to collaborate. So this year, our calendar committee, as Joe said, we have stakeholders from the secretarial unit, trying to think who's with the TA unit is there with us, and of course, plenty of teachers. And we discussed that and we suggested to one another and agreed that we could go from 5 to 3 in the coming school year. So right now we have planned for a December, a March, and a May early release day. And as we go through the year, we'll discuss, we'll talk with one another. Teachers also meet once a month in department and grade level meetings also after school. So we do believe that we have the right amount of time. I think if anything, the question that we're asking each other is it spaced where it makes the most sense? And in a way, we won't really know that till we go through the year together. We know the May date is important because that's our transition meeting. So especially the Princeton plan will have a lot of grade to grade conversations as kids move. That will probably be a big placement conversation, especially more so than it is right now, where right now it's 5 to 6 and then 8 to 9. And then specialists will meet with each other, the reading specialists, the math specialists, to talk about kids that are coming their way. So the May meeting is an important one and will be even more important at the elementary level next year. The December and the March meeting, we're leaving those on the calendar. And again, we'll feel our way through. Do we need to move it in the coming year after that, 23, 24? Well, that sounds terrible. That sounds so far away. And maybe just say, is it better in October or is it better in December? But we think 3 is the right number. And we have 2 full days before kids come in August that we use with staff development as well. So we think we're in good shape, and we hope that parents are feeling a little better about the reduction of 2 days where they need to worry about childcare.
Thank you. That's definitely what we're hearing from parents is that burden for childcare. And I guess you can't just have it on 2 full days because of the way you need to space out something like what you're doing in May versus what needs to be happened in December. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Margaret, I had one additional question. It has come up before that every time we have one of these early release days for professional development, it's a Monday. And for some working families, that's difficult because both parents work that day, but they might not work some other day. Is it possible to vary the day of the week so that they're not all on Mondays?
Well, we did that because that's their contract day for the meeting. So what happens is the early release day is a combination of kids going home a couple of hours early, plus they have an hour meeting that day anyway. So in years past, when there wasn't an early release day, they still had the hour at the end of the day where they were meeting. So in order to keep to the contract, we kept that day, which is, I think, the 3rd Monday of the month. And that's why it's a Monday. I have been asked that by parents. They wanted it on Friday so they could go away. And that would be lovely. But again, we stayed with the contract language and honoring the 3rd Monday of the month as their department meeting.
Thank you. It's certainly important to honor the teacher's contract.
Yep.
Any other questions about the calendar? All right, can I get a motion to approve the 4.1? Thank you. The calendar.
Yes.
Can I just get a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. That brings us to our superintendent's report. Before we do that, I did want to let the public know that the board is planning our spring meet and greets. Those were put on hold last year for COVID reasons, but we are planning on resuming those in the near future, hopefully by the end of March, but we'll let you know more details as soon as they're available. We'll send a communication out. Thank you.
Before anyone hears from the superintendent, we would like to invite Jessica Nash to the podium. Jessica Nash is one of our high school art teachers, and as we typically do throughout the second half of our school year, we try to recognize outstanding achievement in various different facets of our school district. We recognize our volleyball team. We recognized 2 weeks ago some musicians, and tonight we've invited Jessica to share with us some information regarding the student that we're going to recognize, one of her art students, and who's participating in something very, very unique, a unique opportunity. So Jessica, welcome.
Thanks, everybody. It's my honor to introduce Ellie Kushner. She's an AP art student here at Hunton, and she's shown incredible commitment to her artistic pursuits, and she's an inspiration to her classmates. Ellie's passion for art is infectious, and it shows. Her work exhibits a high level of skill, and it's earned her many awards throughout her years being here at Hunton, along with an acceptance into a pretty competitive art mentor program at Garrison Art Center. So these 2 pieces up here are from Ellie's mentor program that she worked on, as well as her AP portfolio that she's worked on as well. And she made a presentation to show some of her work and process, and from sketch to the final piece. I want to invite Ellie up just to say a few words, put her on the spot here. Get her used to what it's like to get yourself up there.
Hello, so here I show like my progress from 2019, 2021. So that was kind of like last year, and that's like me starting with digital work. So the next slide, those are just like one of my pieces for my portfolio. It just shows like the progress, the color palette. I learned a lot in class about like colors and everything. And I have an amazing teacher who teaches a lot. And so the next few slides just show like the progress. That was another one. It starts with a sketch and like goes in color. This one might also be a part of my mentorship program. We talk about it a lot, like the color and the lighting and how everything hits the characters. And then the next slide is 2 pieces. I just showed the thumbnails and then them together. I try to use a lot of color in my work. And then the next slide. That's also a progress one. That one's also entering in
The Women's Club of Portland.
yeah, that's also another competition piece.
Thank you.
Hey, those pieces are just beautiful. I assume you're going to pursue art after high school?
Yes.
Good luck to you. I think you'll be very successful. Those pieces are lovely.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Mrs. Nash, for supporting Ellie and many, many other students outside the traditional school day to make sure they have other opportunities that, to help hone their skill and craft. So thank you very much. The only update I have is regarding COVID. It is, as we think we're getting out of it, certainly we're receiving more and more guidance that sometimes doesn't make sense. So just to refresh everyone's memory, on the 27th of February, which was Sunday, the governor held a press conference and said no more masks in public schools, and that was going to be effective on Wednesday. The reason she gave a couple days notice was so that between the decision being made and when masks would be optional, was that for authority agencies, in this case, the New York State Department of Health, could actually write the criteria and change some of the policies and guidance to do that. So in typical fashion, and I say typical because we're almost celebrating 2 years of being in the pandemic and being governed by DOH rules. At 7:21 p.m. yesterday, we finally received 6 pages of guidance and then another 6 pages of FAQs. So as soon as we received that information, we gave it a quick scan, got it out to our staff, got it out to our parents, put it online. And certainly there are more questions that we have answers. So our Superintendent's Council is putting questions together. Our attorneys are putting questions together as well, because there are some contradictions in the guidance. One of the most important pieces of information to underscore to families is that while masking is optional, there is the potential for unvaccinated children to increase of unvaccinated children to be swept up in contact tracing. When we began this process last school year, in the 2021 school year, the rule was everyone wear a mask, everyone be 6 feet apart, and that was the limit for contact tracing. This year, contact tracing or social distancing got moved to 3 feet. So if you are masked, as it had been for the first 8 months of the school year, if you were masked and you were at least 3 feet apart, you would not be subject to contact tracing. The existing guidance that we revert to goes back to 6 feet if you are unmasked. So children in a classroom that are within 6 feet and that are unmasked and that are unvaccinated are subject to quarantine. So that's a really big unintended consequence, I would say, of the guidance of the governor's decision and the guidance that we received yesterday. So we want to make sure families understand that just because we're maskless doesn't mean we're no longer subject to quarantining and contact tracing. All of those rules at this time still apply. And all of those rules still apply whether you're masked or not. Quarantining guidelines do not care if you're masked or not. They care about whether you have proximity. So those are some, again, some hiccups in the policy. That's why it's important that we received all of the information before we broadcasted it. I understand that there are districts who articulated in advance what their rules would be. I'll also tell you those districts that articulated that walked a lot of information back in the last 24 hours because what they thought was going to happen and what they communicated was not actually in line with the guidance. So we're trying to, we posted all of the information today. We have a couple of flow charts that we posted that were presented to us by the Westchester County Department of Health, as well as BOCES. And we can just keep encouraging people to go to our COVID-related website. That's where everything is posted. It's has too much information, but has all of the decision-making information that schools have to follow. So there's that.
Okay, any additional questions about the COVID stuff? Oh, questions, Joe?
Yes.
So what are, Mike, please? Oh,
Our policies for lunch. Can we just go through it by school? Are all schools in line and what are they?
Lunch is recommended 6 feet of social distancing. but you can eat at 3 feet if you can't achieve 6. So for example, last school year, we had 6 feet of social distancing, and we were able to achieve that because we had half of our high school, middle school kids in. We had a number of elementary school kids that were fully remote. When the guidance came out, the initial guidance came out probably in July or August, it said we need to maintain 6 feet social distancing in lunch. School districts like us said, well, then we can't open our doors to everybody because we don't have enough space. So then the DOH changed it and said 6 feet where applicable or where possible, but at least 3 feet. So we meet that requirement of 3 feet of social distancing, even though 6 feet is recommended.
So are we not, so right now our high school, or I know our middle school is dividing. Are we staying with that policy through the end of the year?
For the
or-
rest of the year, yes, because otherwise, one of the unintended consequences, we're gonna have more, we're gonna end up quarantining more kids by default by, this sort of loophole in the guidance that I just shared. So I don't think there are not gonna be any changes to classroom layout or lunch schedules or any of those things. We want to finish the year. We want to try to mitigate. The whole idea is to mitigate the number of students who will end up, who largely could be end up going home because they're unvaccinated, because of this sort of loophole in the guidance.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we provide that information. And then as far as any limitations on capacity at events, games, concerts?
That wasn't shared. And the existing guidance is that the Westchester County Department of Health controls that. They even punted and said each school district can create their own. So now that we're out of that oversight from both the state and the county DOH, we can go back to full capacity. But again, any organization, so for example, if the PTA wants to have a meeting or have a function, they still would be responsible for contact tracing. So some of them may not wish to have in-person events because they don't want to have that burden.
If we have musical theaters, or are we limiting spectators, or are we saying if?
We haven't gotten that far with them, but we haven't gotten that far. We don't have to, but that might be a local decision again, just from a standpoint of managing who sits where, contact tracing, all of those things, because we still have to follow all of those other rules. And if it's a school-related event, we're responsible for reporting that.
Spring teacher meet that I know high school, middle school don't do it, but elementary school spring conferences, are we looking at the possibility of having in-person conferences? As well as
we had that
CSD
conversation
meetings?
a couple months ago in anticipation of this, and we sort of put that on pause because we didn't want to get too far down the planning road without an understanding that what has happened has happened. So we meet with the elementary principals, I think tomorrow, and talk about a number of issues. We'll talk about this. I don't know if Margaret or Lisa want to weigh in on anecdotal information, but I'm sure principals will be more. We'll have more. By and large, the feedback is that we have more participation at PTA meetings, parent-teacher conferences, and IEP meetings solely because they're virtual, and that we're able to schedule those in a more personalized way with those families so they can participate during their lunch hour, during their commute to work or home or whatever, and not be relying on having that information or that important conversation happen in person. But I don't know if you guys want.
I think that I have found we did the month of February is all of our 504 meetings K to 12. And I will tell you that I think we had to reschedule 2 because of snow and 1 because of a parent request. We have none to make up at this point, which is unusual. So all of our 504 meetings are completed. And if there's a straggler, it's on me that I missed it, but most people have already gone through it. And what I get the feedback from families is it's easier for me to go in my car and take my lunch at a different time during that day than it is to take the whole day off from work. And I'm finding that's a lot of feedback from several of our families, from all of our schools. So at this point, I don't anticipate changing any in-person meetings. Number one, I don't have the space anywhere in a building that I can spread out enough. So we have space that we're not on top of each other. And number two, we've really scheduled out, I think, through March and started April already. So if I had to do that, then I have to find placements and I don't have the space right now for more than 2 or 3 people in a row.
I mean, I suspect when we talk with them tomorrow that we may need to talk about a hybrid model where there are some slots for in-person, because there are certainly parents that wanted to be back in the building, but we did pretty overwhelmingly hear positive feedback that, as Lisa said, you know, I could take my lunch hour and do my parent visit and not lose a day's pay or not lose a sick day or whatever it is you had to call out for. Not everybody gets paid when they take a day off, so we have to also understand that. So this was eye-opening. And I think overwhelmingly the teacher feedback was positive. They felt they had met with many more parents than they had in the past. So I'm suspecting that we may have to think through what would this look like if we had both in-person and video chat available for folks, but we'll see what tomorrow brings.
I don't think that excludes, I know parents want in the building. Some parents have never been in a building, right?
Right.
So I don't think that excludes maybe some open houses or whatever that comes with Princeton planning. But I think at this point, the way we have the meeting set up, it's successful for most, I'd say 98% of our families. And again, I'm going back to the space thing because we have to plan way ahead to get rooms in buildings.
I am sure that many parents like it, but I urge you to offer a program that allows parents the option to choose. All right, I've heard a lot of elementary school parents express an interest in being in the schools and meeting with their teachers. So please try to make it a priority, is what I'm asking.
I know I can't say that I can make that happen. Again, it's the space piece. And if I'm going to do it, I prefer to do it in the building. But right now, with the space and the amount of space we will need for a team of 10, if it's an annual review or a re-eval, there's no spaces in the buildings. We have to share space. It's not confidential. I maybe May and June, we could look at that, but right now I don't have the space in the buildings. To find an extra classroom space if I need to work somewhere with a team of teachers, it's very difficult. Sometimes I can find the library, but it's not always confidential. So we really have to think about that. It's a lot of planning when you do CSEs, because you also have the New York State assessments. So hopefully next year we can get back to that and offer parents in person versus virtual meetings for my piece of it. Your piece is totally different.
Okay. And then can you just, maybe I was misunderstanding. I thought when I said expose individuals regardless of vaccination can stay in school with masking and testing. I thought I read that.
That's always been the guidance.
Okay.
Yeah. that
Masking
didn't
and
change.
testing.
Yeah.
And how would we monitor, like, because I thought testing was,
The testing piece is test to stay. So as long as you're asymptomatic, you are eligible, because you can't be sick and it's, but if you're asymptomatic, you can take COVID tests on a scheduled basis within your first 5 or 6 days. And those are administered by the school nurse. And so those are personal conversations the nurse will set up with you and say, okay, we come in at 8 o'clock or 7:45 or whatever. They'll do the test, they'll administer the test, it's self-administered, and then they'll write down the results. That information is confidentially shared with the students' teachers.
Okay.
Because it's a medical record.
So it's still sort of optional.
Well, it's not optional. If you want to be in school, you've got to
You have
test
to
for
test
test to stay. If you
Okay.
are refusing the test, you're not eligible to come in under test to stay.
Okay.
Yeah, that remained unchanged.
That remained unchanged. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still monitored and by the nurse, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so as far as quarantining, there was 2 different possibilities of 2 different types of quarantining. Can you just walk through both?
Quarantining didn't change either with this guidance.
Okay.
So it all goes back to the February 4th guidance. That's also online. Quarantining has changed over the course of the year, regarding whether or not you were vaccinated, whether or not you tested positive and how long ago you tested positive, and regarding your symptoms. And regarding masking, quarantining doesn't care whether you have a mask on or not, so that doesn't change anything. So everything still reverts back to the previous guidance. So what we were doing 2 weeks ago is what we need to continue doing going forward. And that's, again, one of the unintended consequences that we're all, many people are celebrating the fact that we can be maskless, but the rest of the dominoes of those policies have not changed. And either they need to, or they need to explicitly say they have not changed. For example, I think it was on the third page, sad I know this, but the third page of the guidance yesterday said something about quarantining goes, click here for quarantine, that goes back to February 4th.
Yeah, it was something.
Yep, so, and that's sometimes what they do. Here's the new rule, click here for the old rule, and you've got, 30 pages of guidance that you're trying to put it all together.
So if two people are maskless, somebody has, a child comes down or a student comes down with COVID, if a child who was exposed is unvaccinated,
It's always about vaccination and it's about your symptoms. Masks, the quarantining guidance was written assuming everyone's masked, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about your proximity, the duration of your proximity, and then your symptoms and vaccination status.
Okay. And is there any talk amongst the schools about field trips?
Yeah, I mean, they had been eligible to go to field trips that were outside. I think the fear was trying to go on an indoor field trip and keep everyone socially distanced and those sort of things. I'm sure we'll talk about that tomorrow. Our internal policies are, I think, I'll get the date wrong, but at some point in June, we stop field trips because that's when we need our buses and drivers and custodians in the school. But yeah, we would certainly entertain them if there are places to go and can be funded and scheduled in advance. Those are important part of students' educational experience.
And how about overnight field trips? Any determination?
So Shokin? No, Shokin was off the table more than a month ago because we were getting too close to going and not enough information. And so all three schools, their fifth grade staff with their PTAs pulled that and planned alternative trips. I don't know if all three fifth grades have announced them, but I know they're all planned. I think Frank G was the last one to be firmed up and really last 48 hours. I think we talked, it was mentioned yesterday during our meeting. So if fifth grade parents don't know that yet, they will soon.
I think it's not.
All right, Alexis, did Jen miss anything?
No.
I wrote it down.
My question is about vaccinated students. How are parents, should we be sending you vaccination status to like the school nurse? Or is
You
it still
can
through like the Department of Health? Like,
Yeah, you can only volunteer that information. We can't make you give it to us.
can you ask for it?
We can ask for it, but I think what nurses are asking, what the process the nurses wanted to use is they wanted to ask for it when it was necessary.
Oh.
Otherwise, they didn't want it to all be flooded at once. So we would ask you for your child's vaccination status as part of a larger conversation about contact tracing and being.
From a specific incident?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think my pediatrician added it to our whole form
Yes.
of vaccines that my child has had that then gets handed to the nurse. So eventually, all of that information will get into it.
And then it goes in their backpack, so it's safe.
Virtual, telling their high school.
The virtual backpack.
Anybody else questions about the mask, no mask? Did you have anything else for superintendent? All righty, that brings us to our presentation and discussion on our deck.
Work on this stuff bed. Which is part of the next. Our deck is started by twins. We need to apply that to the for capital projects. The first two are loans that we issue because of our capital capital projects at the beginning of the century, 2001 and 2002. Those two debts are going to mature next year. Where next year we're going to have maybe the last year of payments. The following one is the capital debt for a small bond that we did in around 2011, $4.6 million. The following one is debt that we did for infrastructure. It was infrastructure, technology, and policies. That debt has two different maturities. We wanted to manage our assets without liability, so the technology portion, we financed it at 7 years, because back then we thought that 7 years was the time that we needed to match the asset and the liability. The life of the asset was only 7 years. Fortunately, we have found out that technology gets obsolete a lot faster than 7 years. So we already have been spending a lot of money replacing all the switches and servers that we bought back then. And then the last one is the $18.5 million capital project that we finished a couple of years ago. And that debt, we are still doing bond anticipation notes because I'm waiting for higher state aid. In the moment that we get a higher state aid, then I'll convert it into a long-term bond. Next. Every year we have a proposition for buses. That's how we finance our buses. So we finance our buses with bond anticipation notes, 1 year bonds. This year we paid for the last 5 years. So next year we're only having one bond, which is the money that we raised to buy the vehicles for this year. Next. The way we finance our desktops and Chromebooks and all our technology in the classroom is through computer leases. The original idea back in 2008 was to have a cycle of 6 years. So every school will have will buy computers 1 year, so they would last 6 years. And then on the 6th year, we will buy the Office suite for Microsoft. So 5 years for computers and equipment and 1 year for software. As you can see, for those books, and then we go 3. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because of COVID, we decided to switch that. The last 2 years, what we have bought were Chromebooks, the servers that didn't last the 7 years that we were expecting. So now, next year, we're going to try to go back to our 6-year cycle. And next year is the high school term to buy equipment for the classroom. Next. We have another type of debt, and that's the energy performance contract. Back in 2010, we spent $2.6 million in making the district more efficient in terms of electricity, oil, utilities. So the idea was that with the savings that we have from electricity and oil and all our utilities, we will pay for the debt. Actually, yesterday during finance committee, they asked me to know how we know that the savings are there. the board has in front of them a yearly audit that we get from Siemens to show the whole story that they do to be sure that we are saving enough to pay for the debt, because in a year that it hasn't happened, that we don't save enough, they have to pay us back the difference. Or you can see in your audit report, I think it's from last year or from 2 years ago, how in debt they look at the savings compared to our cost of debt. And finally, back in 2011, due to the financial crisis, the fact that homes and businesses their value was substantially lower. We had a lot of tax authorities. We didn't have the money to pay it, so we issued 2 tax authority bonds, one that matured last year, this one that will mature next year. Next. So here you have our whole total debt profile. Like any company, we don't have a credit rating from Moody's or S&P, but we have a credit rating from the state of New York. Our credit rating is at the top. Our total debt that we could incur for the state of New York is over $100 million. And as you can see, our total debt is way below that amount. So that's the debt of our school district.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Enrique? Lisa?
I was just wondering, do we anticipate when we're going to be having that higher state aid that you were speaking about? Is that something?
Well, in normal way, in a normal cycle, it takes 3 years. Joe and I have been talking to all our legislators, to everyone, to see if they can push those 3 years beforehand. So far, obviously, we haven't had much success, but hopefully, it can happen for next year, or if not, we'll have to wait for 2 years.
All right, so most will be 2 years from now. And the other question I had was, with the computer leases, I'm not sure what the DW stands for on that slide.
DW, district-wide.
Or district-wide, okay. And so when does the high school come into the rotation?
Next year.
Next year. And will that middle school is?
The middle school will be the following year.
Will be a different.
The following year.
Okay, thank you.
On the energy performance contracts, the sponsors of these, have they ever had to pay out because the savings wasn't enough?
No. Our savings are way ahead of our cost of debt. When I started here in 2008, we were paying utilities about $1.2 million. After the energy performance contract, it went down to 900,000. Even though we started buying smart boards, we started buying more computers per class. So their base is by the number of kilowatt hours. Because if not, obviously we spend more money now that we spent in 2008 in power, just because of the computers, the servers, everything else. So that's why the story is so thick, because they have to be able to compare apples to apples. Since then also, obviously, we've done a lot more than just the EPC. We did the solar panels, that the cost of electricity from the solar panels are a lot cheaper compared to NIPA. Also, at one point, we did a program where we taught all the students and teachers and employees how to turn on the lights, how to turn off the lights. And then next year, we're going to start with another EPC. In prior EPC, we moved from regular light bulbs to fluorescent. Now we're going to move to LEDs. So there's still ways to go to be able to save the money. They are doing the study. They started the study job in October, no? And they are still doing the study to be sure the savings are going to be there, because not that have to pay us back.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Enrique. All right, that brings us to our first audience comment section on our agenda items. Do you have any speakers? No, is it Ms. Hickey? Ms. Hickey. All right. I'm going to read a shortened directions this evening. You don't have to sit down. It really is shortened. If you want the lengthier version, it is on the board docs. So each speaker should have signed in with Carmen, our district clerk, prior to commenting. When called, you should step up to the podium, state your name and affiliation, if applicable, prior to starting your comment. Letters, petitions, or other written material should be handed to the district clerk. You're permitted 3 minutes for your comments, and all comments must be directed to the board as a whole or the board president. The board will listen to comments, but will not necessarily debate or discuss items. Operational matters will be directed, to school administrators for handling. The board is not permitted to address personnel or individual student matters in open session. And the board expects comments to be made without interference from the audience and in a civil manner, please. That's it.
I wanted to make a comment about the parent-teacher conferences. I know the board addressed having in-person comments. CSC at 504 totally makes sense to have Zoom. They're about an hour long, sometimes even shorter. So taking a whole day off of work, I can see why parents prefer Zoom conferences for that. Parent-teacher conferences. I think if you're living it, you need to realize that you had increased involvement with your Zoom parent-teacher conferences because parents had no other way to be involved because of the pandemic. So now, when you take that out of the equation, in-person conferences are exactly what the term says, in person. We want to go in, we want to see the schools. I want to kind of envision what my son's day looks like. Walking down the hall, going into the cafeteria, going into his room. I want to see his work, I want to see other students' work. So be very careful about taking the in-person conferences off the table. I'm going to agree with one of the administrators with the hybrid method being more conducive of what your community would want. Is that my 3 minutes?
Still more. You have more.
There's still more? There's still more. Okay, but maybe I should save it for another. Field trip's gonna make it really, really quick, because I did send an email and I sent it to all of the principals. I can tell that no one on the board, and I don't know anyone personally, has a 5th grade student. Because if you did, you would realize that the Ashokan trip is more than a field trip. I went on the Ashokan trip 40 years ago. And if you live in this community, you know it's part of this community. It's a rite of passage. So now here's where the communication slips. Parents did not know it was off the table a month ago. Parents were still going to the PTA meetings, thinking that it was definitely a viable option. No one thought that it could be overnight, but we still thought it was a viable option. So now on 2/15, you send an email home that said that that it was canceled because of COVID-related issues. I called Ashokan. I spoke to Dan. 33 school districts in the lower Hudson Valley have booked that trip and confirmed it. So now it's the rumor mill, because now people are saying, no, it's the teachers who canceled the trip. No, it's the administrators who canceled the trip. No, it's because the Shopping requires vaccines. No, the Shopping requires masks. All false. I want to say this one thing. Teachers do not make any decisions without it being approved by administration. And now I'm going to leave you with this. In my school district, when it's for the kids, we have a motto: make it happen. Make it happen for the kids.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. There are no other commenters in the section, correct? Okay, so that brings us to board comments. Oh, sorry, committee reports. Anybody have a committee report this evening? We were on break last week, so I don't think there are any committees. Which brings us to board comments and new business. I know Lisa has the resolutions for us to re-examine and
Okay, so the first one that we discussed last time that we met was about ensuring the long-term success of public schools. And that includes all of the ways in which we are urging our governmental officials to focus the funding that will be coming to school districts for this next budget cycle or next school year. The only change we had discussed making to this one was the addition of, there's in red on the second page, we added the text, Hendrick Hudson School District joins school districts in Westchester Public School Boards Association and the New York State School Boards Association to call on the legislature. So Corey had suggested that we add that statement to this, and so I have done so. If you want to.
can I get a, oh, I guess I should ask if there are any questions for this, basically the same thing we did last week. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution with the correction as stated? Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. And there's a second one.
Yes, there is. The second one is urging our government officials, as well as I think Department of Health, Stephen Holmes, yeah, they are, Department of Health and Westchester County Department of Health, to provide clear metrics for the schools with regard to COVID. And I did revise this again, taking in line with the comments that were made last time. Now, in light of the changes that have been made recently, I don't know if we still feel there is a need for this resolution. And so that's kind of what I want to talk with everybody about. Personally, I think it could still be valuable. And you might all disagree with me now, but just because it's going out and it's still asking for an advance warning, advance notification of changes that would be made to any of these phone calls. And also it's just urging them to make sure that things are very clear and we know what the rules are. And as Joe's been talking about earlier today, these rules, they're a mess. And, they try to fix them, but they're still not really fixed. So I still think it would be valuable, but, I certainly want to hear what the rest of them have to say about it. Yeah, Jen.
So I agree that, but I guess it wouldn't be about metrics to me then, because I think that what we're just asking for is not emails at 7:21 at night. Like, that's the unacceptable part, because there's no way for us to process that in a timely manner to get it to our community. So I think the resolution is not really about metrics anymore. It's more about better communication. Because I sort of agree with you. We can petition, tell them they're not giving us the information soon enough. They're giving it to us less than 12 hours before they want us to implement the change. That's a problem. That's the problem that I see.
I think there's still a problem with metrics, because they haven't provided us with metrics. They just said, okay, the federal government says this is what it's going to be, so you guys can take your masks off. But predictability could be enhanced if they said if there's X percentage of cases in the hospitals or whatever, so that we have a little bit of full line, perhaps.
But they did, the deal.
But receiving those metrics then makes us have to make decisions based on metrics that we're not really qualified to evaluate.
right?
They're saying these agencies would make the decisions on metrics. So we're looking for some transparency that before you come up with a new rule, DOH, tell us the criteria you're going to use, pre-publish that. So when you make a decision, we know that you made the decision based on information you told us you would make the decision. We wouldn't be responsible for implementing any of this locally. It would just be a window into their thinking, into the data that they're using for when they come out with new guidance. They're able to point to it, you know, Hendrick Hudson or Westchester County, you got to put your mask on because we said on March 2nd, if infection rate gets to X, we've got to go back to masking. And on April 1st, let's say it's at X. Well, now we can be prepared. We can communicate that. That was the intent at the beginning. Because what happened a year ago-ish was the governor at the time was using different metrics on the fly. So they almost got it right. They had different metrics to put communities in a red zone, yellow zone, green zone, and then abandoned that because school districts like us are between multiple municipalities. So, you know, how do we respond when part of our district's in Peekskill, or you may not get super specific, but that was one of the issues. One of the issues was that we want to know what we can expect from the best of the situation to the worst before you just tell us that we have to do it at 7:20. And the you have to do it is, yes, they put handcuffs on us because they are the authority agency. What they're doing is they're showing us what data they're going to use before they make that decision. That was the intent. But we do not, I think we have universal agreement, and I know the School Boards Association does, and the State Superintendent's Council, that we should not be making that decision at this table. The health department or whomever should, but they should be making it based on information they tell us they're going to make it.
Right.
Going back to just what was said at the last board meeting, and I think Jen and Alexis were getting out of it. The overall theme of this, I don't have a problem with, but the asking to issue clear science-based metrics, which you, Jen, were focusing on that, but those are the exact words I underlined here, science-based metrics, that I have an issue with, because like I said, last board meeting is that by the time they issue it, it's going to be obsolete. So I think the general theme of this I'm okay with, but if we scratch science-based metrics and maybe replaced it with something to the effect of timely information, which basically reads to issue clear, timely information that will determine what COVID protocols, I think I'd be okay with that. But if you're asking for science-based metrics, the way things change so much, it'll be obsolete before Joe gets it at 7:15. That's why I have an issue. It's like, be careful what you ask for, because if you have science-based metrics and then you're held to it, but they're obsolete, then you're complaining that it's no longer valid.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Because new variants are different, and you might not have any science to base your metrics on at that point. It's too soon.
Yeah, it's a ever learning situation. And with vaccines, new variants, I think it's dangerous to ask for something to be that, you know, put into a metrics that's concrete.
That's why I was like, more about communication. That's why I was thinking it was more about timely communication than metrics. It was.
All right, so should we tweak this again and bring it back next time?
Well, we want to tweak it
Or do we want to
now.
tweak it now? All right.
So should we just make? So we could just change the, that second, I guess it's the first sentence in the therefore be a resolved section to read that the Henry Hudson School District, Joint School Districts and Westchester Public School Boards Association and the New York State School Boards Association to call on the governor, the New York State Department of Health and Westchester County Department of Health to issue clear and timely information that will determine what COVID protocols will be required in New York public schools, the circumstances where changes to these protocols will be allowed, and to provide these metrics with sufficient time for their implementation. There still is metrics in there though. The last
The
metrics
last-
is very
the last
last
line.
very last line.
This information?
I could do that, provide this information.
This information.
Okay. And then we should probably change the heading on it
Yeah.
too, to be update COVID protocols based on clear information. That's a.
Or timely information.
Timely information, okay.
Timely and clear information.
Very good.
Anybody else have any input or comments? You Good with this? All right, can I get a, what do you call it, a motion? Can I get a motion to approve this resolution? Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. Anybody else have anything for new business?
Just thank you, Lisa. Thank you for championing these.
5 times over.
Yes, thanks for taking care of this for us.
All right, anybody else new business? Jen, you look like you want to say something.
I do. I guess I thought we were gonna have something about Princeton plan today, but I guess not. So I know a few weeks back I thought about it and milled about it a little bit, but is there any thought about? I know we said we have an internal transition committee. Is there any thoughts or opinion on involving parents on that? Or having some sort of parent involvement in a transition committee?
We don't have a committee.
Well, I guess then,
I mean, the principals are working during early release days. They work with their current faculty and then their proposed faculty. But there isn't, I mean, it's really their, yeah, I'm trying to think. There isn't a secret committee doing it. They're the ones responsible for implementing. So I don't know.
So it sounds like you'd like more parent involvement. in the
yeah, I mean,
discussion.
you and I spoke about this. I thought you actually said there was a committee, so maybe paraphrase. or
No, I
something.
think you said there was a committee.
Okay.
Maybe there should be a committee.
I don't know. So yes. Yes,
So
is
you'd
there-
like
what
to
is
find
there
more
ways
ways
to
for
get
parent
parent involvement?
In addition to the PTA discussions that are being.
Yeah, that
had
are
with
not, yeah,
principals.
that's not working. So yes, so parent discussion with administrators to give them some ideas, some suggestions before they go down a path of planning that parents aren't gonna like. And if they have ideas, and they have suggestions and solutions to their issues, why would we not happen to tap into those solutions?
Yeah, I think that's exactly their intent as we get closer, as we have the open houses in April and May. I know that they're going to meet, we're talking with them tomorrow about meeting with their next year's PTA to do a Q&A and figure out everything from pickup to drop off to bus loops to playgrounds to fire safety, meeting with the new PTAs after they get organized about field trips and outside, what is it, education, verboses, what's the arts and education, all of those things. So I think we'll get there. We're just not there yet. We're still finishing staff, putting staff in classrooms, packing, moving. I think we're probably a couple months away from that.
I mean, but we're in March, so when we're a couple months away from asking parents what they would like to see, or what, I mean, that's what I.
Well, I really don't know what your ask is, because
So,
we want to include parents, and I think that's our goal, but we need to include them in a way where we are on the cusp of making decisions that most impact parents,
okay,
to ask for their input before we make the decision, like busing, for example. Liz is
Okay.
finishing the bus schedule right now, or a draft bus schedule, so we'll know potential drop off and pickup times. So that conversation is going to lead to, what about parents? Where do parents drop their kids off? When do they drop their kids off? What about morning supervision, breakfast, so on and so forth. Cafeteria, not supervision, but recess, those sort of things. I just don't think we're there yet to ask for that input, because like I said, we're at a low level Maslow of identifying who, if I'm a principal, who my staff is, where they're going to work, who they're going to be clustered with, what the schedule is, who the teachers are in terms of art, music, those sort of things. And I think that's always been our intent to bring parents in closer, but when we're ready to say, okay, does this make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I know busing specifically because we have to, I know parents that need children dropped off and picked up at alternate locations other than their home have to have that paperwork in by what, May 1st or the end of April. And, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it makes a big difference for someone who's commuting by train. So where are we in being able to provide that to parents? Because that's really 2 months away. And then having the ability to have parents provide you some input. Like when we say we're a few months away, I'm concerned we're right here, like we're at the cusp of this.
So my question is, what's the intent of who's pulling the parents in to give information? Is the principals? Is it going to be? Who?
I mean, we have active parents who come to this board
No.
meeting
No,
every week.
I'm not
Why doesn't
asking
it start
you.
there?
I'm asking, I know we want to involve parents and get their opinions. So what different ways are we planning to do that?
Yeah, we meet with the principals tomorrow. We'll ask them that. I know that they're interested or are scheduled to meet with their new PTAs, and typically that's the venue where input gets shared. I've been to many PTAs, and principals are asking, what do you think about this? Or this is what we're considering. Let me know, surveys, those sorts of things. I think it's the what. What are the decisions? Because we're trying to keep next year is normal for normal in terms of systems and operations as possible, so that there aren't many disruptions where everything's new. Yeah, you might be on the new bus and you might be at a new bus stop in a new time, but the flow and the day-to-day of a student's experience is going to remain hopefully unchanged, regardless of what school they're leaving this year and what school they're going to next year. So I think we've got to meet with them to say, what are the unknowns that you need some guidance on? And then it is on the table for them to meet with their PTAs to say, let's have a PTA meeting of next year's prospective parents and start talking about these things and throw ideas on the wall and get input and facilitate some decisions that could make sense.
Yeah, and maybe not at a PTA meeting, like maybe at a meeting about Princeton plan, because with all the principals together, with all the parents together, so we all get this, everyone gets the same information.
I don't know where we would have that.
Well, you can have it virtually, it could be still virtually, but I mean, the BB principal goes to the BB one, but he's not even gonna be at BB next year, right? So and he's not gonna have 40% of the students that he currently has, right? Like he's only gonna have 2 grades and then another whole set of students and parents that he hasn't even heard from yet.
Right, so you're suggesting like a town hall and have all 3 of the,
Yes.
of the elementary
Yes,
principals involved and then do questions ahead of time, like those Q&As like we did.
yes. Maybe they have solutions.
Can
as
I
well.
jump in a sec? So,
Yes.
yeah, we do, sorry. The principals do have meetings scheduled in their new buildings, and that's coming up, isn't it? For argument's sake, Mrs. Teresi, who will be the new principal at BV, will be inviting the incoming 2nd and 3rd grade parents to meet with her at that school. I would imagine that would be a great opportunity. I know that they're planning tours of the buildings. I'm sure there will be an FAQ and maybe an opportunity for parents to either create parking lots of questions. We received a lot of great feedback through the PTA survey, which has already been responded to from those of us that have expertise in the areas that they targeted. But also we shared that information with the principals. There were some really good ideas there that came across for each of the 3 buildings in relation to the targeted age groups that will be there. So I would think, I can't remember the dates of the visits, I'm sorry, but they are coming up relatively quickly. I know that the incoming kindergarten orientation for parents is in April. And I believe though the visits for the other parents that are already in the district were earlier than that. I can't remember.
So Margaret, you're talking to the elementary principals tomorrow, is that
Yes.
right? So can you kind of ask them how they're planning on involving parents and circle back to us at our
Sure.
next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, be great. Any
know I had
other
one-
new business?
I know I have one more question. Give me a second.
Going once, going twice. Anybody else have any
Oh.
new business? Well, Dennis?
One more question.
Yes.
Moving. So I saw on the timeline that it was moving. We were, teachers would be setting up their classrooms in July. Are teachers all, is that all prepared and are teachers on board with that? Is that?
In the summer, I mean, depending on when they're packed and moved, we're meeting with, well, the calendar got approved today, so there are at least 2 days in August. We're talking to the teachers union about opening school earlier, depending on when they're ready for them to start unpacking on their own.
Okay.
We have teachers who are in schools all year long, organizing, making copies, throwing things out. It's going to be a matter of when the custodians feel it's ready when they do their deep cleaning. They usually pull everything out. They, I was going to say sand the floors, they wax the floors, they, fix whatever needs fixed, and then they give the okay sign, and everyone comes in mid-August, and that's what they need to do. I think the only thing that will impact that schedule is getting the contents from the pods to the classrooms, and then say, okay, all of your materials are in your classroom, come and set up.
Do you envision there'd be more time for setup this year than in the past?
Well, we would give them more access,
Yes.
certainly.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
envision that they'll have more time available and they're prepared and,
Oh, yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
I just want to make sure that it's clear that they're prepared and they know that they're gonna have more time to set up, so it should not be a problem.
One other little thing. It's not a question, but just a statement. High school is having their fashion show on March 11th, and so if everyone can support that, I think it would be much appreciated by the high school seniors.
All right, so that brings us to our next audience comment section, which is on non-agenda items. We have, you guys commenting as another, a non-agenda. Do you have a non-agenda item as well? I will not read the statement again because I think that we are all aware of it.
Something one of the board members just said about parent involvement in the Princeton plan. There are some things that the parents aren't even aware of. We don't know that they're questions yet. And I want to caution you, too many times as educators, me being one, we make policies, but we don't live those policies. And until you're living a policy, you don't realize that it's there. On paper, it looks good. And I didn't realize that until I had my own child, and I only have one. And I've been in education for over 25 years. So be mindful that there are questions that parents still don't know that they have about the Princeton plan. And we're making policies, and unless you have an elementary school child, you're not living them.
Thank you. Any other speakers for non-agenda items? Thank you. So I believe we have another topic for an executive session this evening. But this ends our public portion. We are going back into executive session in a moment for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation. We are not expecting to make any actions based on our executive conversation, so we're not planning on coming back into public session. So the audience may leave. There won't be anything else to watch. Can I get a motion to move into exec, please? So moved. Can I get a second? And now that we're in exec, I will, executive privilege, say that our next meeting will be on March 16th. And